In this tutorial in CyberLink PowerDirector, we're going to look at two ways to replace elements in your media room, timeline, or library in CyberLink PowerDirector. This comes as a result of a query I have from one of my subscribers who said, I'm editing an image that's already in a library, and I'd like the edited version automatically to show up when I reload the library. Is there a way to do that? Well, actually, you can do that related to the library, but more than that, you can do it in your media room or timeline as well. First of all, let's show you the conventional way of changing an item that you've edited. We have on the screen some things that might be fun to eat. We have an image of an apple, and then we have an image of a pickle. Let's assume that we have edited the apple in a program like Photoshop, and we want to use the replacement one in our project. The conventional way to do that is do your editing and then reopen PowerDirector, right-click, and click on Import Media Files. And here I have an apple with a smiley face. We'll use that. I'll click on that and click on Open. And then I can take my image, drag it down, and drop it right into my track and click on Replace, and I've replaced it here and in the library. If I want to save the library with the new file, I can delete the old file if I want to. I won't do that in this case, but I simply right-click and say Export Library, and we'll call it Fruit, which is the one we had before, and I'll replace it, and now I've replaced it in my library. I want to take this out of my library. I simply delete the image there, right-click and do Export again, and we'll overwrite the file. We'll click on the same file name and save it, and now we have it in our library. We'll go back and replace this one here on the timeline. And now we'll save our project with Control S. This is a conventional way. So you bring in the changed element, you put it in the media room, you drag it to the timeline. Now there's another way to do that I'd like to show you. It might not be something you would use often, but in some cases it might be helpful. This is where you actually go to your file system. And you can use this because when you save a project in PowerDirector, or when you save a library in PowerDirector, you're not actually saving the images. You're saving links to the images. Now to illustrate that, I'd like to open up a library file. And here we have a file for a library. This is actually one that contains the two elements that you see on the screen, the image of the pickle and the one of the apple. It contains all kinds of information. But when I open this up in Excel, one thing I notice is I can see the location of the images and the name of the images. That's all stored in the library. So we're going to use that to our advantage in using a different technique here. I'll minimize that. We'll get back to my copy of CyberLink PowerDirector's project. What I'd like to do is rename the newly designed Smile apple as the original apple, and it will automatically change the picture I see in my media room and on my timeline and in my library. But in order to do any renaming, I have to make sure that I don't have that active on the screen at the same time. So I'm going to click on File. We'll just go back to New Project. And now the images aren't active. I'm going to open up my Windows file system, and here I have an apple and my apple with the smile on it. Right now, PowerDirector is looking into this file called Apple. All I need to do is change the way I label these files. We're going to swap the names. We'll take our apple and click on the rename button, and we'll call this apple old. We'll click on our apple smile, we'll click on the rename, and we'll call this apple. And now when we open PowerDirector, it will point to this image, which is in the same file location rather than the other one. So we'll minimize that. We'll go back and reopen our project. And when we do, we're going to see a change. Not only is the smile here, Apple, in our media room, it's also on the timeline. We also find the same thing. I'm going to empty the library. Let's pull in the library. We're going to pull in our fruit library. And notice in the library, as this pulls this in, it pulls in the same object, because basically it just knows the name and we've reassigned the name to a different file. Now, using the same kind of technique, we're going to, let's click on New Project to make sure these aren't active. We won't save the changes. We're going to go back into our file system, and let's assume that we want to change this one, Apple. We'll rename that to Apple Smile. And we'll actually take this picture of a baseball and we'll rename that as Apple. Now, when we close this out and reload our project, we'll find that PowerDirector points to the same file name, but now it belongs to a completely different picture. So this is kind of a way to use the structure of how libraries are saved and how projects are saved in PowerDirector to change items without actually working inside PowerDirector to do that. You might find this useful in some occasions, but at least it helps you understand the inner workings of PowerDirector.